You're listening to The Bird Bath, presented by The Fountain Report. I'm your host, Ryan Leach. Welcome back to The Bird Bath. Each week, we scrape the surface of the news you need to know, so let's get into it. This week, we're kicking off with some Chewy news, as well as some meme stock news. So if you are not familiar with a meme stock, it is... I'm going to have to break down some internet lore here for you, but a meme stock is a stock that sees a surge or a buy or sell or a just general activity based on a push by internet groups, especially a Reddit and a subreddit called r Wall Street Bets, where there's a general consensus and design for a group of people online to push and hold or stay the course, which is usually holding it with diamond hands, to have a major impact on the share price of a large business. The company that comes to mind for a lot of people when they think of a meme stock is the stock GameStop, which the movie Dumb Money was actually made about. And the leading character in that movie is who we're talking about today. The leading character is a guy who goes by the name Roaring Kitty. And Roaring Kitty, this story feels ridiculous to say, but it's actually real money news. But Roaring Kitty was a major driver behind the growth and skyrocketing price of GameStop during the COVID pandemic, based on the fact that they say they liked the stock. And Roaring Kitty has come back out of being silent this past week to announce a major ownership stake in Chewy. Now, Chewy, as all of you know, the online retailer, has something in common with GameStop. They share a former kind of an interesting overlapping story. The co-founder of Chewy, Ryan Cohen, actually went on to become the CEO of GameStop, what was, I guess, in some ways the catalyst for Roaring Kitty and many people online to feel emboldened to see the growth of GameStop. And so now we're seeing a lot of bullish behavior around Chewy's stock price. It was announced by Roaring Kitty. I don't know how many times I'm going to say this before it sounds absolutely ridiculous, but it was announced that Roaring Kitty has a 6.6% stake in the company, which comes out to about $250 million. So it's funny names and ridiculous concepts, but it's serious money here. And the announcement of this major ownership piece by an individual skyrocketed the price and made it a very hot stock for a short while here, and traditionally a meme stock, and one that skyrocketed up. But as institutional investors began diving back into it, the stock began falling again. So if you are someone that follows stock prices and what Chewy's doing, you probably saw a spike, and you're now again seeing it trending downward. This sort of all comes together around the same time where last week Chewy announced that they were going to be doing a repurchase of over 17.5 million of its shares from their largest shareholder, BC Partners. It comes out to about $500 million of their shares that they were repurchasing. And the goal there is to somewhat invigorate the fortunes of the company. Chewy has unfortunately been on a bit of a rough stint in their stock price. They're at their lowest levels they've been since pre-pandemic numbers. Although they are up year to date, they have been seeing some really difficult times over the past couple years here, despite being a business that many in the vet space are looking to as a leader in the space. They are seeing some difficult stuff around their stock price there. So curious to see if Roaring Kitty and Diamond Hands and all the meme stock stuff does a change to Chewy, or if we'll continue to see these stock numbers stay around the mid to high 20s. If you're not here for stock price news, maybe you'll be here for something that could save the life of an animal. There was an update to the Veterinary CPR guidelines. The reassessment campaign on veterinary resuscitation initiative unveiled the first major revision of its global veterinary cardiopulmonary resuscitation guidelines since 2012. They've set out new life-saving standards based on groundbreaking scientific advancements and extensive community feedback. What they've set out are to create the definitive CPR guidelines for veterinary health professionals worldwide. Updates that they put out included chest compression techniques, enhanced methods for cats and small dogs to survive cardiac arrest, compression depths and techniques, adjustments and tailoring to animal size and chest shape, as well as improving CPR effectiveness, breathing support methods, in non-intubated patients. There's a lot of different things here, and I'm going to make sure that I link this because this is something that's really interesting for practitioners to make sure that you're up to date on the newest things, but also everyone across the globe here. If you could have the opportunity to understand CPR, I know that it was something really important when I had my girls that we learned infant CPR and child CPR, and it might be something that saves the lives of one of our furry friends. So I'll make sure that I link those updated guidelines and make sure to take a second to peek through those. In more business news, MedVet, the provider of emergency and specialty veterinary care, announced that they've received a minority capital investment from Leonard Green and Partners, which goes by LGP, and a senior loan term from Oak Hill Advisors. They're going to continue working with Huntington Bank. The intention of these investments is to allow MedVet to continue accelerating their next stage of growth and provide their minority shareholders a successful exit from their 2019 investments, as well as providing partial liquidity for some of their employee owners. MedVet has a large share of DVMs that own a large portion of the business, and so this is allowing some of that equity to be able to be liquidated for them to be able to find some additional time or some additional capital to retire and move on and actualize the things that they built alongside MedVet. This is LPG's first investment into the vet sector, and MedVet's previous investors were some really big names that if you've been following along, you're very familiar with. Goldman Sachs is one that you probably didn't need to follow along with to know about, but also Skynight as well as Stonehenge Partners. So Stonehenge, when I went to their website and dug into it a bit, they listed themselves as having realized their investment from 2019. So that means that they are either previously paid out or were paid out in this part and are off the cap table there with MedVet. Skynight, they did not have an update there on their site, but they are deeply invested into the vet field as well, with their investment in GoodVet. There was a really interesting story on a website called PE Hub, where if you're trying to keep up to date on some of this stuff, it's a great place to sort of see what's coming up ahead of time. On that site, they floated the idea that MedVet was looking to sell or trade the business at around a 15 times EBITDA. And we've talked about EBITDA here multiple times, but when we saw these absolute peaks, especially for ERs, we were seeing things in the mid 20s. Was not unusual for a platform or a group of ERs, but the expectation here was to see something in the 15 to 20 time multiple range, which is still a very, very high amount of money, but definitely a pullback from the astronomical numbers we were seeing pre-pandemic. So it's nice to see that people are transacting on these groups. It's allowing the consolidation to continue growing, but it's definitely something that's becoming more attainable or more digestible. The other thing that was interesting as they talked about this story was PE Hub hit on an idea of who they thought the partners were going to be before they announced this story. This story came out prior to the announcement of the investment from LPG, but they hit on some interesting things about the fact that you wouldn't expect to see other private equity firms that have a large veterinary practice being the partner to invest in MedVet. This came up because of the FTC scrutiny that came after JAB acquired Ethos and looked to merge that with NVA, and they were actually blocked due to non-competitive or anti-competitive concerns by the FTC. So interesting to see this. It was, called perfectly by the team at PE Hub, so really something to look at. There's another potential merger that people are talking about. I don't have any confirmation of it happening, but I'm doing my research and I hope to bring you that story next week. So stay tuned to find out what else is happening. It seems like people are starting to pick back up in the space and starting to do more of these transactions. Finally, I gave you some billion-dollar stories and some million-dollar stories and, a lot of numbers. So I want to end you with something fun. A tiny puppy was the first to undergo a new life-saving heart procedure at Washington State University. So a Maltese puppy named Carter became the first dog to undergo this new procedure, and it'll provide a safer option for the tiniest of patients diagnosed with patent ductus arteriosus, or PDA, which is a common and deadly congenital heart defect. So as you all know, I'm always trying to learn more about the medical work that's happening within this space. And the report from Washington State said PDA was something that's diagnosed very early on in small dogs, and can be something that is an issue with the heart valve and is fatal if not caught and treated early. But the previous way to treat this was a very, very extensive and invasive surgery that took several hours. This new procedure is a catheter that's implanted, and the surgery, this first procedure, took less than 2 hours to complete. So it's pretty revolutionary. It's an opportunity to utilize new medicine, which we're always talking about. Last week we talked about the rising cost of healthcare and some of the difficulties that people are seeing around that. But this is where we're seeing advancements in medicine that are allowing our animals to live longer. And in this situation, it was actually it was a easier or perhaps less invasive procedure, less time under for the dog, less sutures, less openness of the cavity, and an opportunity there to allow these patients and these animals to live longer and recover sooner. So always excited to see these medical advancements, and congratulations to the team at Washington State University for doing this, and all of our best wishes to Carter for a speedy recovery. For more on these and other stories, be sure to join us by subscribing to the Fountain Report. There's always a link in the bio. And don't miss out on any episodes by subscribing and rating the show. For the Bird Bath, I'm Ryan Leach. See you next week.